Introduction. There is to be a new science, that is true science. With true science I mean a science that does not per se exclude the spiritual dimension. The perennial science I rediscovered was a true science in this sense, because it never lost its original continuum of being a true philosophia, a science inspired by the love for truth, for wisdom. Emonics is thus a term I have allocated to an old science, the perennial science of the bioenergy, as most of non-Western cultures have preserved more or less extended parts of it. Western culture stands out by its collective denial of the most fundamental patterns of living. In our Western scientific tradition, scientists who acknowledged the bioplasmatic energy were rejected, slandered, and persecuted by the mainstream of system conformists, and many of their books were burned. And yet, this denial of truth that seems to be inherent in Western civilization is not to be found elsewhere in human history and mythology, as Joseph Campbell has affirmed. In fact, all the other great civilizations have since millennia acknowledged the fact that life is basically a function of energy, and that's dynamic and systemic and not static and mechanical. And from this principle, that in the Hermetic tradition was metaphorically expressed with as it is above, so it is below, it appears in line with functional logic that what is inside the cell will also envelop the body. And in fact, this bioplasmatic energy is both inside the cell and it surrounds the physical body like a transparent shell. It folds 7 subtle energy layers around the physical or dense body that extend more than just a few inches. From their energy-based life paradigm, traditional Chinese and Tibetan medicine as well as Ayurveda from India were able to discover the meridians as major pipelines of the bioenergetic flow and could develop the tremendously effective medical science of acupuncture that still a decade back in time was unheard of in mechanistic, symptomatic, and palliative Western medicine. Even today, and despite quantum physics, Western science and medical establishments continue to stubbornly deny what is evident, that life is holistically coded in energy patterns. And yet, people like Heraclitus, Aristotle, Paracelsus, Goethe, Mesmer, Swedenborg, Chardin, Freud, Jung, Einstein, Reich, Reichenbach, Burr, Heisenberg, Bohm or Wilbur, and many others of our great scientists and poets all had and have something important to say about this matter, but it goes, for the most part, unnoticed. Such a sworn resistance against knowledge that is perennial is all too typical for the arrogant attitude of most Western scientists and their mouthpiece media. I really think that Western science is misguided from the start, in that it always had this tendency to discard out from its scientific worldview much more than it ever observed and retained. Think only of feng shui, the heritage of the Druid sages, the fairy worlds, shamanism, plant energies, morphogenetic fields, ectoplasms, telekinesis, prophecy, astrology, numerology, or channeling. All these subjects were never embraced by official Western science, while great minds and brains have researched about these phenomena all over the world.